Welcome. Good afternoon. Hello. Welcome to Heritage Radio's Issues and Perspectives. I'm Joseph Berment-McDowall, and today's guest is Mr. Afra Raymond. Afra, what capacity are we conducting this interview? And since you have told me you're not here representing JCC.
Well, on this occasion, I am here as Afra Raymond, the private citizen who is concerned about certain matters. I'm not speaking as JCC president. And we're discussing non-JCC matters.
Okay, so I think it's a kind of misnomer to describe it as being in your private capacity, because I will describe you as an activist of sorts.
Well, that's what I said. It's a private capacity in which I'm discussing issues that are of my private concern, public matters.
Of private, I like that.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Mr. Raymond, and
Thank
and
you
this is the
once again.
and today, in case you're forgotten, is Tuesday, the 27th of August, 2013.
Good.
And we are here live at 104 in Woodford Street, and we are broadcasting on the World Wide Web at heritageradiott.com.
Yes.
And you could also listen to us on the go if you have a mobile device, by courtesy of a wireless internet connection, or otherwise even on your desktop. And if you're listening to us while in your vehicle, our call signal once again is 101.7. And before we begin today's interview with Mr. Raymond, some words of wisdom from the ancient Chinese masters.
4 limbs of leadership. The body of leadership has 4 limbs: enlightenment and virtue, speech and action, humaneness and justice, etiquette and law. Enlightenment and virtue are the root of the teaching. Humaneness and justice are the branches of the teaching. With no root, it is impossible to stand. With no branches, it is impossible to be complete. The ancient sages saw that students could not govern themselves, so they set up communities to settle them and established leadership to direct them. Therefore, the honor of the community is not for the leader. The plenitude of the necessities of life is not for the students. All of it is for the way of enlightenment. Therefore, a good leader should first honor enlightenment and virtue, and be careful in speech and action. To be able to be a student, one should think first of goodness and right, and follow etiquette and law. Thus the leadership could not stand but for the students, and the students cannot develop without the leadership. The leadership and the students are like the body and the arms, like the head and the feet. When great and small accord without opposition, they go by means of each other. Therefore it is said, students keep the communities keep virtue. If the leadership has no virtue, then that community is on the verge of decline.
So, Afra, welcome once more to Heritage Radio 101.7, and thank you for coming and sharing your opinions. Good afternoon.
Joseph, when I listened to that clip you just played, I think you said it was the ancient, was it Chinese wisdom?
Well, it's taken from an audiobook called The Book of Leadership. It's a text that was written about 250 years before the Common Era.
Yeah, but what's interesting about it is its relationship to our situation in the nation today. And of course, I am, at this season, every year this season, I'm in a particularly reflective mode. There are 2 months of the year when I reflect. My reflective season is August and September. The 1st of August is emancipation. The 31st of August is independence, which is Saturday. And of course, the 24th
You want to know how
of
independent
September,
and emancipated we have become?
well, I'm not even finished yet. The 24th of September
It's
is Republic Day.
Day, yeah.
So in fact, from my mind, how my mind processes things, and for some years now, these 2 months have always been a period of reflection, and there's a whole shift in my tone, how I look at things and how I write and how I talk about things. And I try to cast my mind back a little further and forward a little further and try to get a little more insight. But it's interesting that I should come here this evening and you read that, you play that quotation about the qualities of good leadership and so on, and the situation we find ourselves in now.
I wonder whether, Afra, you have remarked to yourself frequently, or maybe friends or relatives may have, that possibly what set people like yourself apart is that you have a way of thinking and, as you say, processing information that is analyzing, I presume, by extension, that is uncommon in the nature of society that we live in.
I don't know.
Let me put the question another way. If you were to live in a big metropolitan city like New York, well, let's say English-speaking, Toronto, London, Miami, Atlanta, do you think that the communities in those cities would have valued your contribution to society in relative terms more so than we do in Trinidad and Tobago?
I hesitate to give a judgment on that, but I take the point you seem to be driving towards, which is that we have possibly a different set of values here. I don't know which one is superior.
I have a friend from India.
Having lived in those places, I don't know which one is superior.
I have a friend who's from India, and she recognizes all of the challenges that India faces. But she describes Trinidad and Tobago as a nala. And a nala means, you know, you have a big drain like the dry river. Mm-hmm. And then you have a small drain, like the drain you might have in front of your house. Then you have one that is somewhere in between, like the one on Charlotte Street. And then you have a little fetid, stinking pool of slow-moving water. And that is, in her language, I believe Hindi, is called a nala. And she describes Trinidad and Tobago as a nala. And although I love this country dearly, I think that it's a pejorative description that probably we well deserve at this time, as a construct from where we must reconstruct ourselves into being a different people, and having a clean, clear, flowing stream at the center of our heart and society.
Well, again, provocative, Joseph. You started off with the leadership clip for us, and then this Anala, the muddy pond, to go back to David Rudder's...
Fetid, slow moving.
To go back to David Rudder's praise song, out of a muddy pond, 10,000 flowers bloom. And he was singing about the rising of Pan in Port of Spain about 75 years ago.
Well, we can see
So
we can see the potential. Isn't that
So,
why we criticize it? We can see what we can become. Mm-hmm. Some people have insisted to me that we can never be great. And I say that for a little nation like England to dare to have an empire that was hundreds of times its size at a time when maybe they were worse than we in their norms and values and so on, tells us what we can become. Or Japan even.
Yes. But that is attached honor to imperialism, and that's a whole other complicated political, economic, and metaphysical discussion. They're attaching honor to imperialism and colonialism, and we have to be careful the things we attach honor to. Controlling things that are beyond our control, or telling yourself you're controlling it, which was the downfall of the empire. They amassed great wealth, but there was a tremendous downfall that followed from that, post-World War II and
But
so on.
you know, the same Book of Ancients that you were listening to asserts that one of the reasons that kingship was established was to make sure that kings who were oppressive don't prevail. That the purpose of a king is to bring order, to bring good governance, to unify. Maybe some of the imperialists overextended their hands in their mandate, but we can't dismiss that entirely.
No, we can't.
Shaka Zulu, if the Bantu Bushmen from South Africa was probably cursed the day that he arrived in that part of Africa. You just look at the skin colors of the dominant ethnicity in South Africa, and you feel the temperature when you're there, and you know that they don't belong.
You get a clue.
So continue, please. Why are you here today, Afra?
Well, today we're here to discuss the Treasury Scandal.
And
the Treasury Scandal refers, starting off with the classic calypso by Attila the Hun from 1937, into missing money from the Trinidad and Tobago Treasury, and the lack of accountability and the lack of punishment for white-collar crime. We're extending that discussion to right now, today. Despite the fact that we've had independence, we've attained Republican status, and we have universal education, the fact of the matter is that at this moment in time, and regardless to use that Trinidadian pithy term, regardless of who's in office, whether it's the People's National Movement or the People's Partnership who are now in office, regardless of who's democratically elected in this country, we have a Treasury scandal of the first water playing out in Trinidad and Tobago. And that Treasury scandal is rooted in the CL financial fiasco and the fact that our Treasury has been pledged in murky circumstances to bail out the debts of CL Financial, which found itself in a crisis, reportedly in January 09. We don't know actually when the crisis happened. It's reported that it's January 09. Could have been a good while before that.
I get the impression that this whole CL Financial thing, the way, including the way that they picked up the Hindu Credit Union and took it along with them to put more wind in the sails, and the great populist furore that was created around this issue to make it feel and sound as if every ordinary Tom, Dick, and Harry was going to be awfully trampled by all of this, was just a way to protect elites and to enrich them at the public purse for making mistakes which they made, fully conscious of the risk that they were taking, fully aware of the possibility that it could have gone sour, and now they have found a way, as you say, to hijack the Treasury. Am I correct?
Yes. It's a hijack. It's a financial crime of the century, what's taking place. And let me declare, Joseph, up front, I myself had money in Clico. It wasn't one of the fancy high-interest policies.
But you know you were taking a big chance.
No, I had a normal insurance policy.
Okay.
This is not one of the fancy ones.
Okay.
A normal pension, a bread and butter pension.
Has that been affected by all of this?
Well, I took the action about 9 months ago to get that money, and I'm using that money to finance this legal struggle that I'm involved in now.
So you are involved in a legal struggle?
I've taken legal action against the Ministry of Finance under the Freedom of Information Act to force the publication of certain details that the Ministry of Finance appears, from all court appearances, to be determined to suppress. That is the Treasury scandal. 24 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars, according to the affidavit of Mr. Winston Ducaran, sworn affidavit of 3rd of April 2012. 24 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars are being spent behind this bailout. 24 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars is 3.72 billion US dollars. That is a colossal amount of money in the history of the Caribbean. Colossal.
But
all of the other things that we discuss, the fire truck and this flag,
chump change,
all of that is a puppy show to this 3.72 billion US dollars. And at the same time, because I will go into more details later, at the same time that the Ministry of Finance is expressing to the public that in fact we've come to the end of the bailout process, the negotiations are at an end, and we have found a way to reconcile the books and to pay back the money and to put the money back into the Treasury that we used to bail out CL. At the same time that is taking place, they have engaged a high-powered, high-priced legal team to oppose my application in the court.
to suppress
To
evidence.
suppress information that is public information about the expenditure of public money, supposedly in the public interest. That is today's Treasury scandal. And that is what is confronting this country now. And we need to be very, very clear. This is a serious, serious attempt. And it has happened. We don't know in whose interest. To who did all of that money go?
Because the names are not out.
Exactly. The details are being suppressed. And in fact, the point I made, Joseph...
But we heard some people
Sure.
had deposits at the very beginning. And it was amazing that people such as they would have that amount of money at stake in those kinds of products. Because I had known already from and been instructed by the penny bank failure, by the Match Securities rape, which was interconnected with the penny bank failure, by certain postures and certain board meetings and the failure to observe certain covenants in terms of limiting shareholding in Republic Bank. We saw BCCI, we saw International Trust, we saw SWAIT, we saw a whole plentitude
Yes.
of financial institutions
Yes.
go through, and we knew what to expect. I don't think that people such as they should have expected anything other that what has occurred?
What we had taking place here is we had a group that was able to use its political contacts at the very highest level to obtain agreement for a bailout.
Against the public interest.
Hold on. The bailout was signed a week after they paid a dividend to themselves. Okay, they paid a dividend to themselves on the 16th of January 2009. They had an annual general meeting on the 23rd of January 2009 at Trinidad Hilton. Dr. Tiwari was there. He was a board director. And they signed the bailout on the 30th of January 2009. Now, all of that took place in 16 days. And we, those of us who live in Trinidad and Tobago, who know the reality, know how difficult it is to get government approval if you're trying to do this or you're trying to do that. What kind of person could get an agreement
I trying to get
in 2 weeks?
I trying to get TNTech to move a lamppost in Parliament for 8 months.
I wish you luck. What kind of person could get an agreement like that in 2 weeks?
You got to be well connected.
Obviously.
A godfather.
Obviously.
I think Dr. Balgobin describes them as a senior something. I forget the name that he attaches to them. But certainly, you know, it's that dark, powerful force in the shadows that no one sees, no one hears until or unless.
It's a very serious agreement that was struck. And that agreement has allowed the responsible parties to have their debts paid.
Or was there any distinction politically to your understanding? Like, I'm almost certain that there weren't any warring political camps. The interest that this would have served would have cut across the board, cut across political affiliation, party loyalty, ethnicity, tooth bagay. This is just money and power.
Tooth bagay is a nice word for it. But in fact, there was a break. And we have to be able to recognize the break as well as to recognize the continuous pattern. The continuous pattern is the fact that the group was so large that its influence extended across both political spheres, just to use a convenient metric, both political spheres. But there was a break in relation to the fact that Mr. Dukaran, in his first budget, attempted to introduce some controls on who got what money when.
And he wasn't allowed to.
And to limit it. And that caused such a furor. Dukaran's budget in September 2010 caused such a furor that, in fact, I think straight away, 3 groups were formed. The Permel group, the policyholders group, Mr. Ramesh Lawrence Maraj formed one group, and I think there was one other from South. And those groups were lobbying for the interests of policyholders. And the Prime Minister addressed the country on the 1st of October 2010. This is Mrs. Prasad Besessa. And it was a fine address. It reflected many of my sentiments. And she made the point that something serious.
Before the budget, her first budget?
After the budget. It was after Dukaran's budget speech. And she made the point that, listen, this is a serious thing in the country, and we're not going to limit people's rights. We're going to put up a committee to look at it. And in fact, she announced the Commission of Inquiry, which I felt was a big step forward in terms of revealing some, you will never reveal all, some of what had taken place in this country of ours. And we need to learn what's taking place.
You can't reveal the senior oligarchs.
Well, they could reveal some, and some refuse to testify.
They're supposed to have connections to all kinds of underworld activities, and they could rub you out in a second.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, in my opinion, the payment of campaign finance payments and various types of political donations represent a kind of premium on a massive insurance policy. So when Clico paid these payments, I forget the amounts, it was 5 million or 10 million to PNM. I think it was some checks were in the papers and they had the details of it and so on. And when Mr. Pandey received...
I wonder if the president was referring to those checks when he was asking the Inland Revenue to follow the money. Do you think he was thinking of those?
I don't know what he was thinking. You have to ask him when you get him in this chair.
I suppose we can't presume that we know what the president is thinking.
Ask him when he gets in this chair. And then, of course, there were the payments that Mr. Pandey received from Mr. Dupree with relation to his children in England studying and so on. So there was political payments on both sides of the corridor of Parliament, you could say.
Do you believe, as I do, that maybe Mr. Pandey never knew of those payments? And that when he did, probably, maybe it was too late.
No. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I'm not getting into the minutiae of the Pandey case, but there was a clear pattern when Ramesh Maharaj and Sudama made these statements in Parliament in 1999 and 2000 and 2001 about the weakness of Clico and the shocking findings of the Supervisor of Insurance report. A war developed inside of the party.
Cabinet war.
Yeah, which in fact ended up with 3 of those guys getting ejected or walking out, according to whatever
Because
definition you want to put on it, but it was a split.
Because the Clico representatives who surrounded President Robinson, Prime Minister Robinson at the time, seemed to have more influence than anyone. As a matter of fact, some of those boys were some... I'm sorry, I don't mean to offend you by describing it this way. It reminded me of Robinson. It reminded me of living on a big estate. Robinson being the estate owner. Let's call him for a second an honorary white. And you had these mulattoes encircling him, both dark and light-skinned mulattoes. And what we saw for a second was the restoration of the plantation. I think that is what infuriated people and led to the coup in part.
Oh, I see what you mean. I see what you mean. You're talking back in 86. Okay.
And that these guys, the orbit around Mr. Robinson's orbit, were these people who represented a corporate interest. So what you are seeing, which I never made the connection with until today, is that connection with the oligarchs, campaign finance, and Prime Minister Robinson.
Yes. I mean, one of the points I made...
Lord save us.
Well, you may very well say so, Joseph. But one of the points I made in last week's publication was the point about, as far as I'm concerned, and the way I put it, is that I think this whole thing that's taking place, the signing that bailout agreement in that swift and binding fashion, because it's now been found to be binding by the courts and so on, is indicative of a quiet coup against our republic. In fact, a quiet coup in terms of the ascension of finance capital, and the controlling effectively the main levers of the republic.
But isn't this why in the Western system, and I say more particularly so in Europe than in North America, certainly not in America, to a larger degree in Britain, but still it's still not what it ought to be. But if you look at Germany as a model, isn't that why they have, and France, they're so careful with this whole issue of influence, this whole issue of influence and governance, that what we have here is access that is bought and sold like a commodity against the public interest.
Yes.
Like we're hearing now, for instance, someone was making, this guy on RTTV on Prime Interest was saying that what the American Military Defense Corporation does is buy politicians who no longer win votes, so that they influence those. So they become the people who go forward, the proxies. And at the same time, if you are an incumbent in office, you're thinking, well, I could get that cushy contract. Like Hillary Clinton is now giving a speech, according to him, to the Carlyle Group that makes arms, kills people, has people murdered in Afghanistan and otherwise, for $200,000 maybe an hour. And, so you become a proxy. We have the same thing happening in Trinidad in terms of the state is not being governed for us. It's being governed in the interest of these lords.
Yeah, well, I talk about this here. I'm saying that we have a situation where our parliamentary oversight was severely impaired, and that's one of the things I'm applying for, Joseph. There are 4 things I applied under the Freedom of Information Act to get, 4 items of information, and I'll share it with listeners. The first thing I asked for was the audited accounts for CL Financial Group.
Did they ever audit it?
If I was unable to get those, I asked for whatever were the figures the Minister of Finance was relying on, because the Minister of Finance, it was Mr. Dukoran at the time, he was making speeches and he was referring to this many billion and that many billion. Minister Hawaii is continuing in that trend. So I'm saying, if you don't have the audited accounts, I want whatever estimates, drafts, unaudited,
Well, yeah, we also have
preliminary.
forensic.
You must have something
reconstructive
that you're
audit.
working on. Their answer to me was to say to me that, in fact, what do you really mean? So they answered my question with a question. The second thing I asked them for, in September 2011.
Maybe it's that mind of yours, Afra. It's too difficult for ordinary people to keep up
No,
with
no,
it.
no. It's nothing ordinary. People are straight and you're not straight.
You're
Second
listening
point.
to Heritage Radio's Issues and Perspectives for Thursday, the 27th of August 2013. And with us, we have Afra Raymond in his capacity as a private citizen,
Thank you.
raising issues of governance, raising issues of the interconnectedness between political influence and campaign financing against the public interest, but the public being left to pay a bill possibly in perpetuity.
Correct.
Continue.
Let me continue. So the second point I was making, Joseph, is that in September 2011, our parliament put into effect, they debated and they voted for and they approved 2 bills in furtherance of the bailout. Without getting into all the boring details, one of the bills authorized the Minister of Finance to borrow another $10.7 billion.
To facilitate Clico.
It was all to do with the bailout.
Yes.
On top of what had already been spent, the Minister of Finance was properly authorized by Parliament to borrow another $10.7 billion. The second bill cloaked the central bank in immunity from any lawsuits to challenge how it managed the bailout process.
And they should have really been sued.
Now the central bank has already cloaked from the Freedom of Information Act from its inception. This is now a second cloak, so you couldn't even sue them to challenge any decisions they made. My point is this. I was told by several of them that the independent senators in this country were briefed at the Parliament in an official briefing by none less than the sitting Minister of Finance, Mr. Dukaran, and the sitting Governor of the Central Bank, Mr. Ebert Williams, recently retired. They had a team of accountants and lawyers, some lawyers from foreign came down, and they briefed them in detail about why the independent senators should support this bill. It was a critical briefing because the People's Partnership could expect their own parliamentarians to support the proposals. The PNM was going to support it anyway because the PNM was there when the whole disaster unfolded. They are unlikely to raise any awkward points. The only people who could have given difficulty or posed awkward questions would have been the independent senators. So the second part of my application was to ask the Minister of Finance for copies of that briefing. I want copies of the briefing you made to the parliamentarians in the Parliament in the first half of September 2011. You understand me? And I'm told by the Ministry of Finance that, in fact, that briefing, the details of which I'm requesting, is likely to be exempt. So what are we dealing with?
Because
They never said why. They never said why.
But you know, they've been using a loophole here that I find
They never said why.
unjustified, which is as long as Cabinet considers a matter.
Oh, well, I'll come to that just now. That's an important point, but that's not part of this discourse. But the point is that I was refused on that one. The third one I asked for was whether, in fact, I can get details of the bailout. In other words, who got what money when. Actual precise details as opposed to the global accounts. I was told that is probably exempt too. And the fourth thing I asked about was, in fact, had the Minister of Finance insisted that the directors of CL Financial conform to the Integrity in Public Life Act by filing declarations. And they confuffled me. In other words, they didn't really answer me. They answered a question I never asked.
Could anyone confuffle you, Afra?
Well, they confuffled me. And they said that, in fact, they are not allowed to share the declarations with members of the public. I had never asked to see the declarations. All I asked was, did the Minister of Finance insist that the directors of CL Financial file, or did he not insist? It's one simple question I asked. But they did not even want to go there. So we have a situation where 4 inquiries that are designed
For the public interest.
and the
Don't want
public
to make
interest
themselves accountable
to
to the public.
get to the facts of what is happening with our money. Our country has never spent this amount of money. At no time in the Caribbean's history has this amount of money been spent on one thing. At no time. This is the biggest economic scandal of 100 years. And we need to get to grips with the fact that a monumental hoax is
Heist.
probably taking place somewhere in St. Vincent Street. I call it the St. Vincent Street problem because a lot of charlatans have tried to tell people that we have a Wall Street problem here in Trinidad and Tobago. And they've tried to describe what happened to CL Financial in relation to what happened in Wall Street. Well, that is just sheer fantasy.
What
And
we have
fancy
instead is more
stories.
like the great train robbery.
What we have is a St. Vincent Street problem. Starting from the Twin Towers at the bottom, passing somewhere right by the Parliament. The police headquarters is there, and you're going up the road. You have to make sense out of it. And Clico is on St. Vincent Street too. It's a St. Vincent Street problem, not a Wall Street problem. That's what we have here in Trinidad and Tobago. We need the information to decide for ourselves what has really taken place.
Afra, I think it's important before we go to the 5 o'clock news
Sure.
for us to have a sense
Sure.
of what kinds of changes need to happen in Trinidad and Tobago. You know, one would have believed that after the BCCI International Trust, what was it, Southern Sweet,
Yes,
etc.,
yes.
that whatever needed to be fixed would have been robustly fixed. And I get this sense that the only way for this to change is for office holders to become criminally liable when things like these happen and have to go to jail compulsorily. I think they have that in some states. You were the governor of the central bank, and something like a CL Financial went down on your watch, you go into jail for sure. Maybe you'll get out. You may get sprung, as they say, but first you had to make jail. And that one of the things that would not be considered is the possibility of receiving bail while this matter, goes up to wherever it has to go up. Jail without bail. Protective custody, hopefully, because hopefully the people will be so enraged when they understand what you have done that you need not to be on the street at any time of night and day. But more seriously, there has to be some personal criminal liability.
Well, you see, I am not sure that we're going to make that great leap forward. I'm not sure that it's a completely positive space, to be frank, but I'm not sure we're going to make a great leap forward if we're unable to take small steps forward. Let me give you an example of what is a small step. I'm going to name a practical thing. I gave the chronology earlier on that on the 13th of January, CL Financial wrote to the governor of the central bank asking for assistance. On the 16th of January, 3 days later, they paid themselves a dividend. On the 23rd of January, they kept an annual general meeting, and they spoke in glowing terms about it. How the company was doing and its prospects, and it could weather any storm and a lot of stuff like that. It was all in the newspaper. As I mentioned earlier on, Dr. Tiwari was at that meeting at Trinidad Hilton as a board director of CL Financial.
He didn't dissent in any way.
Not as far as the record shows, not as far as I'm aware. Maybe he did, and he could correct me, but I'm not aware he did that. And on the 30th of January, they signed the bailout agreement. The point really being that at some point, Joseph, between the 13th of January 09 and the 30th of January 09, that situation being the largest ever financial agreement must have been considered by Cabinet. And my question is this. Karen Nunes Teixeira, who was the sitting Minister of Finance, was also a shareholder of CL Financial. We happen to know she had 10,891 shares in CL Financial. She's showing on the shareholders register. Question is, was the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago told that a dividend had been paid by the same company that was being bailed out? Were they told yes or no? If they were told and they knew that a dividend had been paid by the company that was being bailed out, that is not proper, and they should have asked for those dividends to be returned, to be disgorged. If they did not know, then what we are contemplating is a situation where the Cabinet, possible conspiracy, the Cabinet certainly made a decision without the full and proper information. And I am saying that apart from Karen Nunes Teixeira, who is now based in Barbados, I believe, there are people in Trinidad and Tobago, and I'll call two names. Conrad Enel is my friend. He was minister in the Ministry of Finance. Mariano Brown is on the radio regularly. He has a show. He has opinions. Both of you were in the Cabinet. What was the position? Did you know or did you not know whether dividends were paid to CL Financial people, shareholders, when you were making that decision to spend billions of our dollars to bail out a company? These people are paying themselves out of profits that are non-existent. And our treasury, when we don't have proper things in the hospital, our treasury is being used to bail out these people. And the question simply is, did you know, were you told, or were you not told? We need to know. And this process of digging away and getting a detailed information is important for us to understand in our parlance who is who and what is what. That is how we're going to get down to the bottom of this question. And these
Afra,
several questions, Joseph.
if both of us were directors of CL Financial 6 months prior to that,
Yeah.
what do you think would have happened? I'm presuming that in this matter you hold me in as high regard as you hold yourself. I may be incorrect, so you may want to say that I would have acted differently from you, or others may have acted on me differently from the way they would have acted. What do you think would have happened if both of us were directors of CL Financial 6 months before that fateful date?
Well, that is a really fascinating question, because what it takes us into is what was the culture of that boardroom.
Do you think we would have lasted?
No, I don't think so, but I'm dealing with the culture of the boardroom.
You
Because
think they would have gotten rid of us, or we would have gotten rid of them?
well, they may have gotten rid of us.
And do you think that you think we would have kept quiet?
Well, you see, this is where it's interesting. There are actually provisions in the Companies Act which prohibit
A director,
a director discussing the business of the company. But in fact, taking half a step back to my last point,
even when you have criminal conspiracy.
there are no legal prohibitions to a member of cabinet discussing what happens in cabinet. Cabinet notes themselves, the actual document, is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. But for a cabinet member to say that this happened in cabinet, that happened in cabinet, is not breaking any law. Therefore, those people who sat in that cabinet in January of 2009 and stayed silent, I'm calling on you once again, publicly. You know what happened. I don't. Share with the country. Tell us what happened. We really need to get down into I do believe, into the details of what happened. This is the largest event in our life here in the Caribbean. We need to know what happened.
As Robin Montano would say, presuming but not assuming that something improper may have occurred.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I don't borrow phrases from Robin Montano, but I hear you. I don't need to borrow. You know? So those are some of the aspects, you know, the four things I needed to know. And the point I was making also, Joseph, is that back in 2008 and 2009, we had an organization called the Indo-Trinidad Equality Council. And they took a real interest, an active interest in something that affected their membership, which was to do with the allegations of a secret scholarship scandal. The Patrick Manning administration was accused.
So.
They were accused of having a secret place where they were giving out scholarships to people who were P&M supporters. It was never advertised. There was no application form. Nobody knew how you get the scholarship. You just got a scholarship. And they kept up a struggle through various parliamentary means. They kept up a legal struggle. And they were successful under the Freedom of Information Act. They were successful. All the information was published in the newspaper. The sum of money involved was $46 million. The head of ITEC, the Indo-Trinidad Equality Council, was Devan Maraj. The leading attorney was Mr. Anand Ramlogan.
Well,
Both of them are in cabinet now.
We expect that they would use these principles, these sacred principles, in the wider public interest.
Well, I expect there to be consistency. You see, because when we are dealing with public administration and the proper principles of public administration, there are three overriding principles. Number one is consistency. Number two is reasonableness. And the third one is openness stroke transparency. Once those three things are observed, you can't go too far wrong. But we have them in breach at this moment in time because the very said cabinet that these two gentlemen are sitting in, and I fully support ITEC in its struggle to reveal the information about what was taking place with that $46 million. That very said cabinet is participating by means of collective cabinet responsibility.
In a cover-up.
They are participating in the suppression of the information around the CL financial bailout. 521 times more money is being spent in the CL financial bailout. 521 is the difference in between 46 million and 24,000 million. 521 times more money is being spent and the information is being suppressed. The requirement for good public administration is reasonableness, transparency, and consistency. You are required to be consistent if you are going to perform in the area of public administration.
It's also the difference between a mortuary refrigerator that refrigerates and one that doesn't.
That sounds morbid. That sounds morbid, Joseph.
But I think we have to deal with the reality of it. It's also the difference between poor people living under squalid circumstances, exploited by property owners, and under, apart from squalor, congested, overpriced, being exploited, and a supply maybe of 5,000 public housing units. You know, and I think that's what we have to reduce those kinds of sums
Absolutely.
to, so that people understand
What's
what
at
the
stake?
impact,
What's at stake?
what's
Yeah.
at stake.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I think that we're really looking at a very serious scenario here. We're looking at a situation where, on the one hand, the Ministry of Finance is claiming to have an agreement in contemplation to settle all of this. And that agreement is supposed to be one where certain assets are being sold and some assets are going to be transferred to government. And I think the company is going to be, what is being contemplated from newspaper reports is that the company is going to be given back to its shareholders.
To Mr. Dupree.
Which means Mr. Dupree. We're going to be given back to its shareholders.
But isn't that extraordinary? You could imagine Mr. Samford was his name, getting back anything.
Joseph, extraordinary is not the word. But the radio is probably
But
not
maybe
the,
he's still influential.
But the radio is probably not the place.
Yeah, but maybe he's still influential. Have you thought of that? That with everything, no matter how much he's been vilified and otherwise, that maybe he's the kind of oligarch that still has long tentacles that can cause people to feel and act in a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt that the hand or the voice of CL Financial still exists in the highest chambers in the Republic. There's no
But
doubt
after
in my
all, I
mind.
mean, apparently they were supporting political parties for a very long time, and I mean, there should be some goodwill there.
Yeah, as I said, it's an insurance policy. You pay those premiums every year, and when disaster strikes, you can cash in the policy. That's what that campaign finance was about. It was about the ultimate, fully comprehensive insurance policy. Force majeure. Force majeure.
So we have to take a break, Afra, and I'd like to let our listeners know that today is Lord Krishna's birthday. So right after we come back, we will have one of our listeners call in to share some words of wisdom from the Bhagavad Gita before we continue with the rest of our discussion with Mr. Raymond and facilitate, I should say, your participation. Thank you very much. We are on the hour for the 5 p.m. news. This is the end of the first segment for Heritage Radio's Issues and Perspectives for Tuesday, the 27th of August, 2013. And I'm here speaking with Afra Raymond on governance and the great central bank heist. Welcome back. This is the second segment of Issues and Perspectives for Tuesday, the 27th of August, 2013. And with us today is Mr. Afra Raymond in his private capacity, speaking the issues of governance and public administration and government. And but before we continue with Mr. Raymond and give you an opportunity to participate, first, in recognition in commemoration of the birthday of Lord Krishna, our dearly beloved caller, Mr. Dairam Suku, will share a few meditations from the sacred scriptures with us. Mr. Suku.
Go ahead.
Please.
Right. Hare Krishna to you and all the listeners, and also to Mr. Afra Raymond.
Thank you. Good evening.
Right. I would like to give a short message on the occasion of Krishna Janmashtami, the birth anniversary of Lord Krishna, who was born in the year 3227 BC. Lord Krishna himself kept his promise to take birth when there is a decline of righteousness and an increase in unrighteousness, and to establish righteousness as is referred to in chapter 4, verse 7 and 8. I quote the verses for you. Whenever there is a decline of righteousness and rise in unrighteousness, then I send forth myself for the protection of good and for the destruction of the wicked and for the establishment of righteousness. I come into being from age to age. I'm continuing. I will give you a short account of the events preceding the birth of Lord Krishna. The planetary systems were automatically adjusted to predict an auspicious occasion. The astrological influence of the constellation known as Rohini appeared. At that time, everywhere there was an atmosphere of peace and prosperity. It was the 8th day after full moon, but on that night the moon appeared to be as full moon. Lord Krishna was born in prison at midnight on the 8th day after full moon in the month of Bhadrapad. That is between August and September. I'm continuing. At the beginning of the Mahabharata war, in the midst of the two armies, which consisted of the children of the 4th generation of King Santanu and others, were ready for battle, then Lord Krishna spoke the Bhagavad Gita. I am referring to 2 verses in Bhagavad Gita, which refers to Lord Krishna as the higher than all else. Chapter 7, verse 7. There is nothing whatever that there is that is higher than I. For whatever there is strong unto me, as rows of gems are threaded on a string. Chapter 10, verse 2. Neither the gods nor the great sages knows any origin of me, for I am the source of all the gods and the great sages in every way. Hare Krishna to all.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your call and thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
You
Good
too.
night, actually.
All right, Mr. Raymond too.
Thank you. Good evening.
So, Afra, please continue.
Right. Let's get right back into it. What we are witnessing here, and we have to bear witness, we have to be stern, because it's our country. We have to bear witness. It's not just for us, as Joseph, as you said earlier on, it wouldn't just be this generation. The next generation is paying for this too. And we have to observe that $24 billion is being paid out. We are being assured by many advertisements and speeches and so on that an agreement is now in prospect and the agreement will repay the Treasury all of the money and so on. And what we are also witnessing at the same time is the strongest efforts to suppress the details of what it is that has been agreed. And I want to say that I can't imagine a reputable, conscientious, upstanding banker agreeing to lend somebody a vast quantity of money without ensuring that their accounts and their business was in order. And that is what has taken place in our country. That is what is so irresponsible about what took place with that agreement in January of 2009. And the irresponsibility is continuing now, with a situation where a final agreement is now being reached. It's being announced in proud terms. And the details of that agreement and the particular figures which we need to know as the public are being suppressed. And that is not the standard I would expect from a reputable, conscientious banker. Of course, I'm making a pointed remark as the Minister of Finance Hawaii. And this is a very serious moment for the nation. If indeed the agreement that the Cabinet is contemplating is an agreement which properly discharges the public interest, if indeed that agreement recovers all of the money spent and returns that money to the Treasury, what is the problem publishing the accounts? What is the big secret? What is this vested interest in suppressing the truth? There's a tremendous amount of hostility to the truth at this moment in our country.
And I think there always was in my book.
Yeah. We're at a particular crossroads here, Joseph.
This is
We
the
really are.
intensification.
Yes, we're at a particular crossroads here. And I want to ask that question once again. What is the difficulty with revealing the truth? If indeed, and I'm putting my words very carefully, if indeed what you have achieved is workable and it represents a proper settlement in our nation's interest, publish the details. If you cannot publish the details, we in the public are entitled to withhold the benefit of the doubt. We are entitled to be skeptical, and we are entitled to wonder If the entire course of this affair, which started during the PNM administration in 08 going into 09, coming into the People's Partnership Administration at present since 2010, if the entire course of this affair has not had an underlying agenda of allowing the CL financial chiefs, most notably Mr. Lawrence Dupree, to return to the company when the company had been patched up or repaired or restored. And if that is something we want to accept in this country, the fit and proper regulations should have been applied by the central bank to ensure that all of those CL financial chiefs, they are no longer fit and proper to be on the board of any financial institution in this country. Those regulations haven't been applied, and I will return to the question I've asked before: why haven't they been applied? Is this a ham-fisted attempt to preserve the legitimacy and the credentials of those individuals so that at a given moment they could be returned to the seat of power, which is what we are witnessing before us? Observe it well. Observe it well, people. The Newsday, Tuesday the 20th of August 2013, last week Tuesday, the Newsday. Page 7. Cabinet approves Clico plan. Observe it well, colleagues, listeners, citizens.
So Cabinet, who
carefully observe it, carefully, colleagues.
A body that that we can't get any minutes from any of their deliberations, no notes.
Yeah, it's like a spy movie up in there.
Has made a decision that affects the public interest, and we are none the wiser.
Well, we get press releases, and the decision seems to be that the committee, the Finance and General Purposes Committee of Cabinet, has agreed to take a particular course. That is the decision that we saw reported in Newsday. I'm choosing my words carefully again because...
but the imbroglio between Prime Minister Manning, former Prime Minister
yes.
Manning, and Mr. Rowley, present leader of the opposition, informed us, if nothing else did, that Cabinet is really the Prime Minister and no one else. As a matter of fact, that was confirmed this week by the Honourable Minister of Works and Local Government, or last week when he said that the Prime Minister will decide in the matter of local government.
Okay.
And that's it, So, I mean, the Prime Minister is an emperor. So, really, it's the Prime Minister's decision.
Well, yeah, it seems that is a norm. But there are some aspects of how we operate the highest levels of the system that need examination. The Cabinet influence in matters is an important question for us to consider as we go into constitutional reform. There appears to be yet another season for discussing constitutional reform and how we could change our constitution to do better for our country. So the Cabinet's role in that is a very important aspect that I would be addressing as we go into that. But seriously, we are at a point where we are about to have the final deal signed off, as they say in business circles. The I's dotted and the T's crossed.
Mortgage the citizens of the nation who are declining in number in terms of members, the number of people who go to work, who are aging. We are not as reproductive as we used to be, so few of us are being born. And that is going to create its own, or has its own time bomb has been set off. The trigger has been pushed already. And now we're going to have something else. This big event put into that pool of outliers, that is going to add to the public burden.
The main point is that we don't know the information, and if we don't know the information, we can't have any clarity. As I said in the corruption equation, Joseph, once you have an expenditure of public money, and that is minus accountability, and it is minus transparency, it's always equal to corruption. And an expenditure of public money without accountability and without transparency is always equal to corruption. We need to have that information published. As I said in previous engagements on this point, natural justice is not negotiable.
But
this is a question of economic and social justice. Natural justice is not negotiable. We need that information published. It is our information. It is our money. It is our country. The whole exercise was supposedly done for the public benefit. We need the details. Sooner rather than later. The longer this drags on, the worse the ending is going to be for those people on the wrong end of it.
The thing of it is that I think what is important for our listeners to understand is that the genesis of this, its construction, its execution, its implement began before this administration came into office.
Absolutely.
And now when we are looking at the missteps and misdeeds of this administration, Many of us have great difficulty with it, but we have to understand that this crime, this heist, was actually executed. It was given validation, the most important validation during the Manning administration.
Yes,
and what we would have looked for this cabinet, this government to do, we would have looked for this cabinet and government actually to release us,
Well,
to set aside, to ameliorate, rather than to intensify and to validate.
yeah, well, in fact, what is interesting is that in construction language, the entire setup was designed and built in the last regime. But I've consistently made the point that some people who operate in the current regime were also chief people inside of CL Financial. Now, like Ambassador Mervyn Assam and of course Minister Dr. Bo Tiwari and so on was on the main board of CL Financial. But the point I'm making here, Joseph, is that there was an attempt, and we have to be honest when we have in these discourse. We are stern, but we have to be honest. We can't be brutal to the truth. There was an attempt by Minister of Finance Dukaran, as he then was, in his first budget in September 2010, to actually stem or to ameliorate, as the word you used, some of the drain on the Treasury and some of the impact this thing was having on the economy. And I don't know, it's difficult to read because there's so many mixed signals and rumors. I don't know how much support he had in cabinet for what he was trying to do and so on. And so I can hardly believe that as Minister of Finance, he got to his feet to read from the budget. And that attempt of his to cut down on the payments and the bailout was in the budget. I hardly believe that he would have done that without having at least members of cabinet having notice of what he was going to say and so on, and their tacit approval at a minimum. Having said that, a huge political row developed, as we know. All of these policyholder groups stood up. The Prime Minister appointed the Commission of Inquiry.
I suppose that is why they wanted to get rid of him.
And it seems that his attempt to ameliorate the damage was an expensive one for him. It seems so to me, as an observer. I'm not privy to anything in cabinet.
And that is why we hear, but it's part of the reason, at least, why we hear nothing from him at the present time. So let's allow our callers to call and maybe interact with you for a couple of minutes before you leave. So our lines are open. You can call us at 628-4846, 628-3896. Please direct your questions to Mr. Raymond. He doesn't have much time. Please be very pointed. Please don't go on and on and on. Poke him, and let him respond quickly. Just as if you're fencing, you're having a duel, rather than, try to construct complex logic. There isn't enough time. He won't be able to respond to you, so it will be wasted. So if you would get straight to it, make your point or your contribution, your observation, if you'd rather do that. So our lines are open. We have our operator has just stepped out for a second to attend to a pressing matter. So he'll be right back. So this is your opportunity to participate. 628-4846, 628-3896. Hello, caller.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir. Would you kindly turn down your radio?
Belmont here.
Would you kindly turn down your radio?
Well, I know, Mr. Raymond has Belmont roots, if not roots branches.
Yes, indeed.
So 3 of us are Belmont.
Yes, indeed.
However,
Good day.
the question is, I would like to know if Mr. Raymond will agree that in the Constitution it should be there that when an election is called and you have a government installed, after at least 2 years, that government should come and meet the people to hear what the people have to say about their performances and what we would like to see, how we should be governed for the 3 years after. Because it is very important that you cannot serve the people if you don't hear the people. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's an interesting point, and it's about the quality of representation. And I don't think it's quite on topic, but it's interesting, and we do need to have a way, an effective way for the politicians to know what are the people's concerns.
Hello, caller. Thank you.
Greetings.
Hello.
Good day.
Good day, sir.
Good day.
Good. Now, what you are doing here is so great that I have to quote 4 lines to you from Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi.
Okay.
What he said is, strength of numbers is the delight of the timid. The valiant in spirit glory in fighting alone.
Now, this battle, sir, are you alone fighting this battle?
Sometimes it seems like it.
Well, sir, you see, I used to teach, and there were people teaching with me, good friends, and one of them, sir, after he came out of training college, he joined Clico. And soon he passed by a friend in Couva area, and that friend's father was a member of parliament in the PNM time. And this friend who joined Clico, the teacher, he came with a Mercedes-Benz. And my friend in Couva was telling me, this person passed, I can't call his name.
Of course not.
This fella has a big gambling place, boy, in town, and he has property in the States.
Okay.
I say, boy, something happening there, I ain't going and join Clico, boy. I go stay with the teaching. No, sir. This battle that you are fighting, sir, it is an epic drama. I had calls to quote Gandhi, some other person called and quoted,
Yes.
And I want to let you know, sir, that you as a person and I as a person, and Mr. Joe is so courageous to have you there on the station, because powerful people come on the station, sir. Ministers and so on.
This might be my last day here,
Not funny. It's not funny.
Sir,
Stop the jokes. Yes.
The Lord is with you. And so I really am so overwhelmed, but I feel that these big people, sir, these short Napoleons that we have, sir, they have to meet the Waterloo.
Yes.
And we have to make a cage
Yes.
and put up some statues and so on and say, well, this fella in jail, that fella in jail. So we have to will them into jail for the public really to see that caricature, sir, that drama, sir, that street drama, that portrayal, sir. We put a name for them, sir.
I like the word you use, caricature. I what I call this a vulgar pantomime.
So thank you, sir, and all the best, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, caller.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am listening to all the discussion here. And to generalize the whole situation, the institutions that were placed in this country to look after ordinary people's investing in finances, in insurances, in credit unions, etc., has all failed us. And these are the people that should be put into jail, because the supervisor of insurance had never taken no action whatsoever, and at no time did his job. That's number one. The commissioner of credit unions have never taken no action and never did nothing when the issue went down the drain. And when you look around, and it just starts with today with this. It starts with CL Financial. It starts with the institution. Before that, there was a credit union. There was a financial organization before that. And that and all had run into trouble and take people money in this country. All the people who invest money in this country are victims of thieves.
As long as only when they're poor.
Yeah, they are victims of thieves,
Yeah,
because
but
all these people who walk around in the collar and tie, pretentiously as they are it, they have stolen the money of poor people who put their money thinking they were putting it in a safe and secured investment. And whether we do what, whether it was Mr. Dukaran, whether it is who at the time, the fact remains is government succeeding government from time after time have did absolutely nothing to make these people do their work and do it as they're supposed to. Else there would be so many people in the jail that I myself wouldn't be able to count them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Afra,
Joseph.
when you look down, you do some, Mary King spoke about foresighting. She was here last week. When you foresight this, what are you seeing? I could tell you, maybe I could help you by telling you what I see. I see a country facing a strong possibility of declining national income, either because of a lack of demand for main export products and foreign exchange earning products, or because of decline in production, no matter what the naysayers say. I see a country increasingly unproductive in terms of the ability, uncompetitive, because of labor market rigidities. You have problems in the labor market with the way business organized, problems with port, with transport, all kinds of things. So you end up in a situation where we can't produce enough goods that we could sell other than natural resources, oil and gas and the things associated from them at a competitive price. So we have a declining national income with a shrinking population, with people getting old and not being replaced by people that are too young. And therefore you're going to end up with because of the kinds of transfers and budgets from time immemorial, that this is going to add to the ballooning deficit that seems to be heading our ways, heading to a location sometime to you. Of course, what the state could do if the money stays in Trinidad and Tobago when that crisis arises is borrow locally like they did 20 years ago and give government savings bonds at a good rate of interest. But that's assuming that the exchange rate is stable, and it probably wouldn't be. People who want to get their money outside of here fast, and interest rates going up in Europe and North America. This is a stew that is toxic, and to grow old here, both of us probably about the same age, in 30 years old, probably if we live that long, it could be hell. I'm seeing hell. I'm seeing hell heading our way. Do you concur with me, or do you have a different view?
Well, I think that we're at an absolutely serious point where we need to get a better quality of information about what's happening in our country. I think we need to call out the various political forces in whatever way we can. There are people listening on the radio here who are members of the various political groups in power. And we need to insist on a level of accountability and transparency from our leaders.
Well, this country has such a feckless culture. So many people disinterested as far as I think that Rolf Balgobin described them correctly when he talks about them as being associate oligarchs. If they get a favor, a little thing, if I get my partner Afra to overvalue or undervalue that property, then everything will be nice with me, and they know people other than Afro who will assist them, and as long as they have that, and they get customs to look the other way and think they're good. That's this country. That's this chewy, and we need something to shift the pendulum in a completely different direction. While you think about that, let's see what our callers have to say. Gone? Okay. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I have said what I have to say, Joseph. This is a serious campaign. I'm going to bounce back to something one of the earlier callers said. Mm-hmm. I think it was the gentleman who quoted Gandhi when he made the point about it being an epic struggle. And I want to bounce back to something I said last week to one of my collaborators on the internet. I'd sent them a copy of that column from the Express, the Business Express, called The Treasury Scandal. And the person said to me, they thanked me, and they said to me, well, they're starting to see some hope in the situation. The situation is going to be resolved, and so. And I said to them, no, I don't agree with you. This is the start of an immense campaign. And hopefully, more and more citizens will recognize the importance of this struggle and get involved in demanding more information. For example, I was interested today to see some calls from some of the policyholders groups. I forget which one exactly. It might have been the one associated with Ramesh Maraj, calling for accounts and making a reference to the fact that I had been calling for the accounts and saying that without the accounts, the policyholders groups didn't know whether they were getting a fair deal. So they are now raising a particular series of
momentum.
points. It seems so. We'll see. Because if people get paid out, they may change their mind and retreat. We don't know. We have to keep on going.
Well, the thing about it is, like, there's one very prominent anti-CL financial, somebody advocating, who's been very prominent, advocating in favor of those people that own that particular annuity, getting compensation and so on. And I remember him asking, making some issues with the Republic Bank IPO, the FCB IPO. Yes. And part of why I didn't take it up is because I felt that I wondered whether the public interest, I didn't get a chance to think about it enough and to ask enough questions, and whether I would be joining a chorus that was not necessary in the public's interest, but maybe some other interest. So I decided to desist. You know.
Well, I mean, I don't want to. I know we're coming down to the end of my time, and I don't want to give a big opinion on the FCB IPO, but I'll just give an analogy. As I was saying to some friends on the weekend, Lyman somewhere, I said to them, "What kind of a horse race is it? We all go to races. We get down in the day. We've all had a bit to drink, and there's a horses lining up for a particular race. All of us are betting people. Everybody bets on the same horse, and everybody wins. What kind of horse race is that? And in fact, who is paying all these winners? And of course, the answer is the public in Trinidad and Tobago, because that will be the extent to which the issue may have been underpriced. Because everybody can't bet on the same horse and all win. You know, somebody has to pay out that money. Money has to come from a pot somewhere. Money doesn't drop from a tree. It doesn't spring from the ground. It has to be earned from somebody and taken from somebody to be given to somebody else.
But you realize if you were an applicant or subscriber,
I didn't, yeah, but go on.
that the state took the opportunity to ask for a certain kind of legal and statutory compliance. You had to have accounts, tax returns, etc., etc. And you know, I have mixed feelings about it. One is that I think that it's a improper impediment to a simple thing like buying and owning something. And the other is, it looks like if so many people in Trinidad and Tobago don't pay their fair share, maybe this is one of the few ways they'll ever be obliged to show something of themselves. Well, let's take a call from our caller. Hello, caller.
Greeting. Second time, Mr. Joe and Mr. Afra. I'm taking.
You know, anytime we get very serious, the calls just get very slim.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Now, sir, you know, we have people in parliament, sir. We have people in churches. We have people on the ground. And we pontificate, all of us. And this is putting you to the test now. And we say Mr. Jack Warner, who has grown out of our culture. We say he's a corrupt man, he's a bad man, and this and that, and all these kinds of things.
He's a son of the soil.
He's a son of the soil. So the question is, you know, we have people jacketed and moneyed and positioned and so on. You know, and they talk from ivory towers and so on, and from temples and churches and what have you, sir. I want you to juxtapose Mr. Jack Warner with these culprits in the society, sir, and tell me really how bad is Mr. Jack?
Juxtapose, Afra. Juxtapose.
Well,
I learned that word when I was in Form 3 reading Thomas Hardy, Far from the Modern Crowd.
That is that's a nice question, but I'll just tell the caller to answer quickly without getting too far off the subject, that I'm on the record as saying that Mr. Warner, as far as I'm concerned, should not have been in Parliament. Okay, that's since July of 2010, and certainly Dr. Tiwari should not have been in Parliament, and for some of the same things I mentioned earlier on in this program. So it's an unfolding situation. That's just my opinion. We have Mr. Warner having formed his own party, and he will make his attempt, and the public will speak. You know, so we'll see. I don't have much more to say on that.
It'll be much of the same, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Hello, caller.
Hello?
Yes, good day, sir.
Good day.
Oh, yes, this question is directed to Afra.
Good day.
Afra, what would you recommend in terms of the construction of oversight group for insurance and banking and other financial activities?
Yeah.
Seeing, for example, the woeful condition that the Integrity Commission has always been at. Who guards the prisons? Where is the integrity that we need in this country to look after the majority population? I mean, you're quite right, and I have had this feeling too when I shared with you and my concern, that the country has been hijacked by people's money.
That's right.
And that's no different than what's happening in the States.
That's right.
We cannot look for an American model.
I know.
And even in Britain, when the head of banks I mean, get up to all the shenanigans they do, the thief.
Yeah.
Okay? So here we are, and when you have a former supervisor in insurance joining the insurance group as an inspector or something, private sector,
Yeah.
And when you have the head person, the inspector of banks, are also being the CEO at a bank. I mean, what we joke in Trinidad and we say, hey,
Once you meant
you sending me, who you sending there to mine what?
Yeah.
And this kind of thing goes on. You have a set of interlocking people up inside Port of Spain. And to add to what Ross Balgin was saying,
Yes.
and I'm borrowing here from Hedges.
Yes.
When the people, like me and you, ordinary people walking in places, we're clerks, and we don't open our mouth, and we just block. And I'm disgusted the way in which people, poor people, uneducated people,
working people.
people
People who must go to work every day, otherwise they can't eat. Yeah.
And the awful thing is that these people are our children.
Yeah.
So we own children turn around and cut we ass.
Yep.
And send me back here. You come from Sirius, come back again.
Yeah.
You come from Toko, there's nothing. You're not done yet.
Yeah.
But where do we start building integrity here? Because we have an awesome education system that threatens people with failure and fails them, 80%.
Yeah.
That is successful human resource management.
Of course.
And then on top of that, you have people whose imagination is imprisoned. They can't think. So they come out there and they sit on these jobs, and where is the belly going to come from to stand up for something that's right? So you have a decent society. And where are the churches? Okay? Where are our major institutions that are not the schools, the education system? It's under control by people at the top. How can you from the bottom make input into the policy of the Ministry of Education? Okay? It's not just that, but you have to start there. You have to start somewhere.
Okay, Mr. Raymond, there's not much time. Thanks for your call, caller.
Leave that with Afra.
Thank you. Thank you. That voice sounds so familiar, like maybe it's somebody I know. But seriously, it's a tremendous list of questions the gentleman gave. I can't answer them all. All I could say is that I'm engaged in an effort to unearth the truth. I'm putting some challenging questions, and at every stage I have tried to put proposals about how the matter might have been resolved in a different fashion. It's not just taking pot shots or criticizing for the sake of criticizing or criticizing to be cute or to be popular, because that's not the mission here. The point is that
it's almost certain in Trinidad and Tobago that if you analyze anything critically and you do so consistently in the public, that after a while people don't like you anymore. I have a friend who was an army colonel who tells me that I should shut my mouth because if people hear you complaining every day, they figure something wrong with you. So his solution is he has nothing to say. He has no opinion.
That is part of the pathology. But we need to keep on working in the interest of developing new perspectives, in the interest of restoring some of the old perspectives which had value. We need to maintain our humanity, maintain our sternness, and keep working forward. Okay, we're not going to stop, and I'm using a collective we, because I could say when I go out, I mean, some of the inferences in the callers is that it's pretty much an individual piece of work, and I want to say no, because yes, sometimes you feel alone, but when I go out, I meet a lot of people who come and speak with me about this program tonight, something that happened last week in the press and so on, who do tune into the work.
What I find,
who are aware of it and who are thankful for it in terms of giving them a fresh perspective of how to look at what's happening in our society.
What I find we don't do, Afra, is we don't support those people who are doing this work for us financially, sufficiently. And to my mind, it's a great dishonor in our society that we expect people like yourself, like Dr. Kublal Singh and others, many others, to do work that is societally critical. Many of the people who write, for instance, on columns and on the dailies and weeklies and so on. And we seem to think that is a burden that they have assumed upon themselves. And what we could do is we could patronize them, tap them up on the back a little bit, and that's enough. And I think this is somewhere that we have to grow.
That's right.
Yeah. Hello, caller. You are our final caller for the before Mr. Raymond leaves, well,
Greetings one more time. I really have taken advantage of this great man that you have there, almost in the pants of Moanda Karamchand Gandhi. Now, one question again, sir. It has to do with materialism, you know. Big people, sir, in fancy cars, sir, polished cars, you know, moving through the slums, sir. They are not getting the sense, sir. And they want to run and put cable all over Laventille, sir. It's a good thing to put a cable because I want to go in Laventille before I die, sir. But these brothers and sisters, sir, they are part of us, sir.
Yes.
And they are watching this materialistic kind of society, the government and the big people, sir. Those people, sir, haven't we produced those people, sir? Those people in power, sir, those Clico magnates, and my friend who was in training college with me, sir.
If you read,
what are these people doing to Laventille, sir?
If you read the history,
Laventille is not a seed of its own, sir. It's a seed of the big people in the society. Thank you.
I think if you read the history of Trinidad and Tobago, I think it in two parts by Henri Louis de Vertaille. I think it cuts off somewhere in the 1800s. You'll read that even then, it's published by Paria. That Trinidad was always known as Smart Man City. You know, you're looking for con men, you're looking for riffraff, you're looking for thuggery and violence. You can find it in Trinidad, even in the old days. Yeah.
That was bored.
Yeah, bored. Yeah, bored. Yes, yeah, bored. So this is the end of Heritage Radio's Issues and Perspectives for Tuesday, the 27th of August, 2013. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm handing you over to our operator, Ravi, for some music, for some commercial messages before the 6 p.m. news. But for now, for us, it's good night and goodbye from me, Joe Berment-McDowall, and Afra.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Thank you, Heritage Radio.
Thank you. Good night.